Thank you so much for joining us today with the Education in Our Community broadcast. I'm Zena Hall, and I'm your host, and we have the distinct honor and pleasure of having our guest, Ms. Barbara Rodgers, here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. I've been looking forward to this moment to be able to interview you and share the living room, the stage, the audience, the platform with you. There's so much to get to know about you.
Okay.
And I just...
you can start anywhere you'd like.
Anywhere we'd like.
Yes,
okay.
Anywhere you'd like.
Well, it's very difficult to start at any point, but considering that you're an 8-time Emmy Award-winning anchor, reporter, and show host, let's see, you're an industry veteran with more than 30 years in front of the viewers.
Actually, I've probably been now, probably when that was written, it was more than 30. It's now about 50. I got into the business. My first TV job was in public affairs, similar to what you're doing here, and that was in 1972. Wow.
So yeah, okay, almost 50.
Yes.
I love that. And that's probably why you're more commonly known in certain arenas as Mama B.
Yes. Well, many of my young people, over the years, there were a lot of interns and younger people who would come to work, and they would come over and they'd say, "Can I talk to you?" They would be so nervous. And I'd say, "Yes, come on, whatever you want." I was always very open to giving them advice if they wanted. And I'd sometimes let them go out in the field with me so they could see how we do it. And then I'd say, "Now, when you get back though, I want you to write the story, because you have to write it the same as I'm doing it, because you have to get used to that." And somebody said one day, "Well, you're like a mama." And I said, "Yes, I'm your Mama B." And that stuck.
And it stuck.
And now there are all kinds of young people, and not so young anymore, who call me Mama B.
I love that. I love that. Now tell us, you're originally from Knoxville?
Knoxville, Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Yes.
And you migrated here when?
I came to San Francisco in 1979, but I started in television, as I said, in 1972 in Rochester, New York. So I came here from Rochester, New York. So it's been 40 years since I've been here.
40 years?
Yeah. In fact, I've now lived in the San Francisco Bay Area longer than I even lived in my hometown growing up, because I left there after college at age 21. So this is the longest I've lived in one area in my life. So I'm almost a native now, San Francisco.
Well, I would say that you're a native, and we've totally adopted you, Mama B.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Now, you're most notably recognized for your time on CBS Channel 5, and you did newscasts up till what, 2000?
2008. I retired in 2008, and actually I still was on a few times after that, because they did call me back for a couple of different stories, like when Nelson Mandela died, because I had met him and had been in South Africa and covered him, so they had me come in and do the obit story. And then there was another wonderful story that they called me in for about 3 years ago, of a young woman who was in her 30s, but I had done a story on her when she was 5 years old.
Okay.
And she needed a heart transplant. But back then, they didn't give heart transplants to 5-year-olds because it was considered experimental for someone so young.
Yes.
And the insurance company, her mother's insurance company, had denied the coverage. And her mother came to us, and I did the story, and she got the heart transplant. And then, of course, I hadn't heard any more about her after that. And then here, 30 years later, she tracked me down and said, "I just wanted to thank you for saving my life." I was just so overcome.
Wow.
And I've kept in touch with her since then. But then when I told them about it at KPIX, and I said, "You guys should do a story on this." I wasn't talking about do it on me, but on her. The fact that we had done a story and it had been responsible for her getting her heart, and here she was 30 years later still alive. And they said, "We should do it with you." And so I went back in and did the story. And then some people saw me on Comcast, because after I left KPIX, Comcast came to me, and I did Comcast Newsmakers from 2010 until 2017.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Tell us some of the wonderful folks and stories.
Well, the nice thing about Comcast Newsmakers was that it gave people who didn't always get interviewed by the main TV stations some exposure for what they were doing in their city. So we interviewed a lot of public officials from the smaller towns, you know, the mayor of San Francisco, the mayor of Oakland, the mayor of San Jose. They always get covered,
Yes.
but nobody's covering the mayor of Benicia. And nobody's covering the mayor of, you know, some of the other,
Albany, smaller,
Livermore or whatever. Well, we did. We covered those. We did stories with all of those, and some of the legislators, people from the Alameda County, Keith Carson, for example, from the Alameda County Board of Supervisors. And so it was a wonderful way to let community people have their time, their moment in the sun, and also to promote some of the things they were working on. And we did a lot of nonprofits during that time. I interviewed a lot of nonprofit leaders and people who had started nonprofits. So I really loved it. They stopped doing it, unfortunately, at the end of 2017, but I enjoyed doing that. It was really a pleasure to be able to meet the people who came in, because almost all of them were doing a service to the community.
I see. When you mentioned the nonprofit, can you speak to Friends of Faith?
Yes.
That was very intriguing.
Some of your viewers might remember Faith Fancher.
Yes.
She was a news reporter at Channel 2, KTVU TV,
Right.
and she was diagnosed with breast cancer back in the 90s. And, people often think that we are rivals because we work at different stations, but for most of us, we support each other, and especially the black folks, and especially the black women. So when this happened to her, she kind of called us together, all of her girl pals from all the different stations, and we were her support group. And we would take her out, for brunch or something. And then one of those brunches, I guess it would have been 97, I believe, she said, "I have an announcement to make. I've turned all of you into a nonprofit, and we're going to be raising money for low-income women with breast cancer." Because what had happened is, during her treatment, she had met women who didn't have insurance, who were struggling, and she felt so fortunate that she had good medical insurance, that she had a support group, and there were a lot of women who didn't. So she wanted to raise money for that. So we did that for 20 years, and we raised a lot of money. We would have an annual walk every year. Unfortunately, Faith did not make it. She died of breast cancer, but we kept the organization going for another 17 years after she died. So we just ended it in 2017.
Wow.
So it was 20 years of raising money and helping a lot of low-income women, and a few men too, because men get breast cancer. A lot of people don't know that men get breast cancer, but there are some men. In fact, Beyonce's father just last year announced that he has breast cancer. Yes.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that. Speaking about some of your accomplishments and your contributions, even to the community, I was almost overwhelmed with how much of your life you've devoted and to so much, the array of just the different areas that you've covered. I'm going to name a couple of them, because I actually have pages and pages, and I understand now why those Emmys were there. You covered, let's see here. It's the United Negro College Fund.
Yes, I won one of their top awards. I did every year for many years the telethon that they used to have.
Yes.
I would be one of the hosts of that. And I, of course, always had a wonderfully soft place in my heart for the United Negro College Fund, because without the United Negro College Fund, I would not have gotten to go to college. And I think this is a story that's worth telling, because young people sometimes feel like they don't have options and opportunities. I grew up as I said, in Tennessee.
Yes.
My family was not college educated. My mother had graduated from high school. My father only had a 6th grade education. Nobody in my family had gone to college. My grandfather, I think, had gone 1 year. Yes. And my sister had not gone to college. She was older than I was. She left after she graduated from high school and went and got a job because she was ready to move on in the world. And so there was really not much expectation that I was going to get to go to college. In fact, one of my high school counselors had said, basically, you shouldn't aspire to that because your parents can't afford it.
Yes.
And, which is kind of a horrible thing to say to a kid, but I'm like, okay, I'll do the best I can. So I took typing and shorthand and bookkeeping in high school because I figured at least if I was only going to have a high school education,
Yes.
I would come out of high school with some skills that might get me a job.
Okay.
Now, I said might because I did not know any black women in my hometown who were bookkeepers or accountants or secretaries, but I thought at least I'll have this skill. So I was a very good student. I was on the honor roll, you know, I was always a good student. So in junior year, when the kids who had families who were sending them to college, when they were getting ready to take the SAT exam, my boyfriend in high school was going to take it that Saturday, and most of my friends, because it was mostly kids who were in the Honor Society, and I was one of them. So I thought, well, I want to take it too. So I found out that it cost $5 back then. This is back in the 60s. It cost $5.
It was a little pricey then.
Yeah, to pay. $5 was a lot for me
Yes.
because I earned my money then babysitting at 25 cents an hour. So $5 was a lot of work. So I found out that it was $5.
Yes.
I paid for it myself, not my parents.
Yes.
And I took the test. And I scored well enough that I got a scholarship to Knoxville College, which is a local, one of the historically black colleges, and it was local in my town. And the day that the information came out, somebody came up and said to me at school, you know, your name's down on the board. And I said, for what? And they said, you got a scholarship. And I said, a scholarship to where? And they said, to Knoxville College. And I said, how did I get a scholarship? Because I did not even
Make the connection.
No, I didn't connect the SAT exam. But that just shows you how sometimes when you're acting on what you want to do, you open up other doors. So had I not gone that Saturday and paid my $5, taken that SAT exam, I might have had a totally different life and maybe not as wonderful as the one I've had. But because I spent my $5 of babysitting money, and do the math, 25 cents an hour.
Yes,
at 25 cents an hour, that's a lot of my money out of my little piggy bank. But I paid it. I took the exam. I got a scholarship. I went to Knoxville College, and the rest, as they say, is history. Yeah.
But see, you're a trailblazer. And at that time, you were already blazing the trail.
I was, but I didn't, so many of the things that I've done, I do them because I'm doing them, I'm not thinking I'm doing this for whatever. I'm doing it because it's what I want to do or because it's what I need to do. And then I find out later, well, you were the first one to do this, and you were the first black woman here, or you were and you opened the door for somebody else. And I think that's wonderful. That's icing on the cake.
That is.
That's icing on the cake.
It's just within you, and it exudes out of you. You can tell you're a giver. You give of yourself.
Yes, I have. But I grew up, as we were talking about earlier, in the church, and in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church at Wallace Chapel AME Zion Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. My grandparents were two of the founders of that church. Their names are on the cornerstone. And we were church-going people. And I learned so much.
That's where it is.
I learned so much in the church, and that's where you learn that giving is important. That's where you learn that you are not the center of the universe, that there are there's more out there. And learn not to be selfish, learn to share. There's so many lessons that you learn. And I even believe that a lot of my success in television broadcasting was because we would do programs in church, and because I always had a really good memory, I would get the longest part. And at my little school, I would get the lead in the class play every year because I could memorize all the lines, and I could do it fairly quickly. And that paid off later in television because there were many days when I was out in the field and I had to memorize everything that I was going to be saying. So
wow. If only you knew.
Yeah, but you know what? It's okay that I didn't know, because sometimes when you're, like I said, when you're just doing what you have to do and what you need to do or what you want to do, you are actually opening another door. And I think young people need to realize that you don't start, at the top. Very few people do that. It happens every now and then, but you generally have to do a number of things, and you're doing it because you want to. The young man who did the popular song, Nas, I think his name is, he's the one who did the song about the horse riding the horse. Became such a big hit. He was being interviewed recently, and I saw that, and he said that he started because he wanted to do this song. He heard a tune and he thought, I'm going to put some words to this, but he didn't have any money.
Yes.
So he said he waited until a studio where they do recordings
Yes.
had $10 Tuesday.
Really?
And he went in and paid $10 so he could make a recording.
Wow.
So you see, it's
And
just
it's a hit.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't immediately, but
True.
eventually it was because it got played. But the things that he did, not having any resources,
That's it.
but doing the research and finding out there was a place that had a $10 Tuesday. You know, that's what I'm saying. You know, sometimes if we're waiting for it to happen to us, it may not happen. But if we go out and do our part, sometimes the rest of it happens.
It happens.
Mm-hmm.
So we have an opportunity to actually take a bird's eye view to some
Okay.
of your memories. Walk us down memory lane here. Here I see you when you're age 2.
Yeah, I think I was about 2.5 here, and this picture was actually taken right in front of this brick wall is actually the front of the church. You can't see the rest of the church, but that's in the churchyard. I told you I grew up in the church.
Literally.
and that's literally true because our house was right behind the church. So that's, my dad took that picture. He was always, if he had a camera, he took a lot of pictures of us when we were kids.
Okay. And I'm actually just going to let you thumb through.
This
and walk
picture
us through the
is
memory
of
lane.
my whole family, or at least my family at that time. My grandfather was not in this picture because he had passed away 2 years before. But this was taken the day that I graduated from college. We were all dressed and ready to go to my college graduation. And I was saying to you earlier, I don't remember exactly who took the picture, but that's me, of course, in the black and white dress. And then my dad and my mom and my sister, who unfortunately has passed on as well. And that was her husband and her son, who was just a year old, a little over a year old then, he was almost 2, and her daughter. And of the people in this picture, of course, my father's passed on, my mother's passed on, my sister's passed on, her husband has passed on, and her young son.
Oh.
Yes, so the only 2 left are me and my niece there, who's sitting on her dad's lap.
Okay.
And she kind of made a career in the Army.
Did you really?
Mhm. And this again shows my mom and dad. This is my mom and dad visiting the newsroom where I had my first TV job in Rochester, New York. And the man standing to my right is Dick Burt. He was the news director and also the main anchor. And he was very supportive. He was really the person who encouraged me. That's the other thing, you know, I want to say to young people, don't think because you are a woman or you're black or you're Asian or you're Latino that there won't be white people who will help you. Because there are some. Not all of them. I'll tell you, not all of them. Some of them will work against you. But there are those like Dick Burt who was very encouraging to me. In fact, he was the one, because I started out doing a public affairs show.
Yes.
He was the one who would say to me, I've been watching that show. You should think of this as a career. And I was like, I was teaching at the time. So I was like, I already got a job. But he kept after me. He would say, you know, you really should do this. You really should do this.
He saw the gem.
He did. He saw something in me that I
he
wasn't
did.
really looking at myself. Of course, this is, everybody knows who this is, Jamie Foxx. This was early in his career. This was back in the 90s, right after he had finished doing In Living Color.
Yes.
And he had played that character called Wanda.
Oh, Wanda.
Yes,
We all know
yes, Wanda.
The beloved Wanda.
And so when we sat down to do the interview, I said, I have to ask you about creating the character of Wanda. And he said, I don't want to talk about that. That's an interviewer's worst nightmare is when you ask a question and the person says, I don't want to answer that question. But I did soften him up and he did talk about it a little. But he was getting ready to launch his singing career at that time.
I see.
He had done a CD and he really wanted to talk about the music, and we did talk about that. But he did, after the interview was over, say, can we do that all over because I didn't like it? And I said, well, sorry, that's it. Even to Jamie Foxx. And this actually is a picture of a young man who had, Kevin, who had done an article about me when this was right the year that I was getting ready to retire, and he had done an article about me, and we had taken this picture in the hallway at KPIX TV Channel 5, and you can see up on the board behind us. At that time, there's a picture of me with Kate Kelly.
Oh.
She and I had anchored a 4:30 show together, and then there's another picture of me with John Kessler because we anchored the noon news together. So I had 2 pictures up on the wall.
Wow.
I was always working hard. And this was also taken that same day, as you see I have on the same outfit. in the newsroom. I was just leaving doing the noon news and from the anchor desk.
Yes.
A chair that I spent a lot of time in, that chair.
That chair.
And then this is my most recent achievement. I was interviewed in 2015 by the History Makers, which is an organization in Chicago that is putting together oral histories of prominent African Americans from around the country.
Yes.
And I was honored to be interviewed by them, first of all, and be in their archives. And then last year, near the end of 2019, they sent me this announcement saying that my interview was going to become a part of the permanent collection at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
love that.
I broke into tears because I so wished
What an
that my mom and
accomplishment.
dad could have been here to see that, but I know they are up there listening. But I was just very, very honored to be, who would have thought little barefoot girl from Tennessee would wind up in the permanent collection at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. So it just shows you that all things are.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm sure you enjoyed those images. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll speak to those a little bit later.
I'm always amazed, though, when I am going back through old photos
Yes.
at how many people I've met and how many different things I've done. Because sometimes you do, as days get busy, you forget. Oh my goodness! And especially now, as I'm trying to downsize, as I'm older and retired, and I'm trying to get some of this stuff under control. I'll pull out a box and I start going through things, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even remember I had met him or her, or that I'd been this place. Sometimes because I've done a lot of things.
You have, and
Yeah.
I wanted to mention a few of the names
Yeah.
that just jumped out at me. See, former President George Bush.
Yes,
You've
I
interviewed.
interviewed him in the White House, and I said, growing up a little girl in Tennessee,
Oh,
how would I have
who would ever
ever
think it?
think that I
Oh,
was going
my
to be in the
stars.
White House interviewing the President of the United
Oh
States?
my goodness.
Yeah.
So that was an experience, I'm sure.
Yes.
Nelson Mandela, and I want you to elaborate on him.
Yes, well, Nelson Mandela, let me just go back to before when he was in prison all those years.
Yes.
I used to follow that whole movement, the Free Nelson Mandela, but I must be honest and say I didn't think they were ever going to let him out of prison. I thought those people over there are never, the white
all
folks are
thought that.
never going to let
He's
him
never
out.
going to get
He
out.
will die in a
Not
prison,
alive.
and especially since it had been so many years.
Yes.
And the morning that he was released, it was a Sunday morning. I happened to be sitting on my bed watching the morning shows, it was the Sunday morning shows,
Yes.
and they said special bulletin, and they cut to South Africa, and it was when he and Winnie were coming out with their fists raised and the crowd was cheering. I just broke into tears because I thought, oh my God, they actually let him out of
Actually
prison.
released him.
So that was just an amazing thing. What happens the next year? He decides he's coming in 1990 to the United States for the first time, and I got to cover it. So not
Did you
just
raise your hand to do it? Or
I
they
did,
just-
and they did not say yes
Excellent.
initially.
Oh,
They did not say,
really?
no, they did not say yes initially. So I raised my hand definitely and said, I think we should cover it. This is historic.
Yes.
He's been in prison all these years. He's coming to the United States for the very first time. We should do it. And he was going to Los Angeles
Yes.
and New York, and then he was going to end it in Oakland with a big rally in the Oakland Coliseum.
Yes.
And they were like, well, I don't know. And I was like, come on, come on. And then I had a producer, also an African-American woman,
Yes.
who said, this would be great. We could do our show, because we were doing this show called Bay Sunday.
Yes, I
And
saw
she said, we could do our show from the Coliseum. And, you know, it was a very ambitious plan. And once we had finally gotten the okay, we were like, can we really pull this off? But we did. We pulled it off. It was just amazing. The day that he did his speech at the United Nations, I was sitting in the galley right up over him, looking down at him. And the one of the UN people there who we talked to and interviewed, he said, he had been in the UN for a long time, and he said normally, when no matter who it is who's coming, some people don't come in; they give up their seat to somebody else.
Yes.
He said, but there was nobody giving up their seat
Oh,
today.
I can
He
imagine.
said everybody wanted to be there to hear Nelson
was
Mandela
history.
speak, and so
History.
he said, in fact, how did you get in? Because and nobody was giving up their seat. Well, I had a photographer. Her name is Cordetta Spells, very tall, beautiful black woman.
Okay.
Who's about 6'2".
Okay.
And when she has that camera on her shoulder, she is just, I mean, nobody else comes in the room except everybody sees her.
She's there.
So we were there, and I was like, I wish I could get in to hear the speech. So we went wandering around in the United Nations building, and there was a security guard standing in the hall. And I said, you know any way we can get in? He said, well, they always leave just a couple of seats, you know, free in the galley.
I see.
And he said upstairs. And he said, but you have to get permission to go in there. I said, who do we get permission from? And he said, I don't know, but when people come, they have some kind of pass to get in. So Cordetta says to him, oh, couldn't you just let these two sisters in? Couldn't you let these two nice sisters in? And he said, well, I mean, she was so beautiful and such a gorgeous tall woman. He said, well, okay, don't tell anybody. And we went in and sat in those two seats right up over Nelson Mandela's head. It was just, I was like so excited. Then we go fast forward again to 1993, when they are finally finally giving the first election where everybody can vote.
Yes.
And I won a fellowship through the National Association of Black Journalists and the Freedom Forum. They picked 5 journalists to go and spend a month in South Africa to cover what was happening as this country was changing. And I was one of the ones who was picked.
Oh my gosh.
I was the only TV person in the group. There were 2 newspaper people, 3 newspaper people, 1 radio person, and 1 TV person. And the radio person was from National Public Radio, in PBS, Public Broadcasting. And then there was, I can't remember all the papers. One was from the Dallas paper. I can't remember where all the papers were, but there were 3 Seattle Times, and the other one I don't remember. And then there was me, the only TV person. And we spent a month in South Africa covering, and that's when I got to meet Nelson Mandela.
Wow.
Yeah, and had the picture taken with him.
Oh, I love that.
I know, but see, again, you just never know what's in store for you.
You don't.
You know, you dream it first.
Yes.
And then you think, well, how can I make the dream to reality? And then a lot of times you do have to take the step. Like you said, did I raise my hand?
Yes.
I did.
And
I raised my hand and said, this
big.
is historic. We need to do this. But you sometimes have to fight for it.
And that's all right.
In fact, most of the time,
We have to say, and that's all
especially
right.
if you're black, especially if you're a black female, you know, a lot of times you've got to fight.
But you've made so much headway. It's unbelievable. And I hate that we're almost running out of time.
Oh, okay.
I cannot believe this. But I want to mention a few other names just so that folks know. You've interviewed Danny Glover, Jamie Foxx, Spike Lee, Terry McMillan, Delroy Lindo, B.D. Wong, Naomi Judd, Deepak Chopra, Neil Simon, Ella Fitzgerald,
Cab Calloway, the Nicholas brothers. I
going.
mean, just so many people. It's, you know, even when I look at the list, I am like amazed that I have not only met, but got to sit down like you're sitting down with me and share with all of these folks. You know, it's just a wonderful opportunity.
I want to also make sure that folks can hear in their own living room some of your achievements. You know, you received 5 excellent awards.
Excellence in Journalism Awards from the National Association of Black Journalists.
Okay. What about the National Coalition of Black Women, 100 Black Women?
Yes, I received their Pioneer Award, which was given to me that year by Kamala Harris, because she was the main speaker that year. This was even before. This was before she was as known as she is now across the country. Yeah.
Okay. And what about the NATAS award?
Well, the Natus Governor's Award, and there is I don't know how much time you have for this story. This is a really wonderful story, where that is the highest award that Natus gives every year.
Yes.
And my mother happened to be in town one year for the Emmy night, when we were going to Emmy night. I took her with me. And the person who was getting the award that year was Shirley Temple Black.
Oh.
So I said to my mother, do you know who that woman is? And she said, no. I said, that's Shirley Temple, because she, of course, was all grown up. She said, you mean little Shirley Temple? I said, yes. So later, when I got the award, the night that I accepted the award, I looked up, and because my mom unfortunately had passed on then, and I said, Mama, your little girl is getting the same award that little Shirley Temple got. And that just was so wonderful to be able to say that.
I love hearing that. And I mean, we didn't even have enough time to just scratch the surface of your
Well, you did.
the
You
legacy.
got a lot in.
Yes, yes, yes.
I am also one of the founders of the Bay Area Black Journalists
And
Association.
that's what I wanted to ask you. Let us know some of the major things that are near and dear to your heart.
Well, definitely the Bay Area Black Journalists Association, because when I came to the Bay Area, each station probably had one black person or maybe two, and there was another reporter who was at the Tribune at the time when Robert Maynard had just taken over. Her name is Marilyn Bailey, and she got a group of us together in her living room, and she said, we're going to start a chapter of the National Association of Black Journalists, and so and it's still going.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
And any other item that you would want to share with us?
Well, you've covered a lot, but I just, I enjoy living. I enjoy in my retirement. People run into me and they say, "What are you doing while you're retired?" I travel all over the world. I've been to all 7 continents.
Wow.
I finished my last one in 2018. I went to Antarctica.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yes.
Did you see any penguins?
I did. I
you
did.
kidding?
Yes, and got to be up close and take pictures with them.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And are there any other things that were on your bucket list that you were able to just
Well,
touch?
a lot of them I've already done. There are a few left. I still want to do a trip on the Orient Express train.
Really?
I've always sort of loved that since I saw the Agatha Christie mysteries.
Okay.
And there's not a lot left that's on the bucket list, because I have done almost all of the things I had on it. I've done them.
So what else do you do in your spare time? Do you cook? Do you have a favorite dish?
I do. I write poetry. Yeah,
Really?
yeah, and I've actually written a novel, but I've got to find an editor to get it edited. I've just been so busy, I haven't had time. Yeah.
Oh, you
so
have to let me know. I have to get one of the first copies.
Oh
there.
yeah, when I get it published, I'll let everybody know. But yeah, that's on the list of things that I hope to get done over the next couple of years, is to publish a book of my poems and also my novel.
Okay. And is there any other thing that you would want to leave with the listeners who
Well,
have this opportunity?
if there are young people listening who say, I don't have opportunities because I'm black or I'm female or I'm poor, I was all of those. I was all of those. Black, female, poor, didn't come from, as I said, a college-educated family, didn't come from a fancy neighborhood. We didn't even have a car until I was probably 13 years old. We didn't have our first TV until I was 12 years old, and we got that because my father found it in the trash. Somebody had put it out.
Really?
And he brought it home and did a little doctoring on it and got it to work, although it only got one channel.
You only got one channel? Probably with the bunny ears, right?
So
With
the
rabbit
thing
ears.
is, if you have a dream, don't ever let anybody else tell you you don't deserve that dream. Don't say you can't do it, because if you're determined to do it and you're really, really willing to work hard, you can do it.
Anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
Yes, and you also have a frame here with Nelson Mandela.
Oh yes, and we talked about that
We talked
earlier,
about
that
that
I got
earlier.
to meet him, but the day that I got that picture with him was very interesting, because we had heard a rumor that he was coming to the Sowetan newspaper in Johannesburg,
Yes.
South Africa.
Yes.
And that day I did not have a cameraman, because he was working on something else, and that wasn't a day I was supposed to shoot with him.
Okay.
So I called him, and he said, "I'm sorry, I've got to go out with the CBS reporter, who was the main reporter for CBS,
Yes,
doing covering at that time." So so I talked to the director of the program for which it was a fellowship program that I was there for. And he said, "We do have a camera in here." He said, "But I don't know how to operate it." I said, "Give it to me, I'll figure it out." And you see in the picture, I'm holding that camera in my hand.
Yes.
Because it was a video camera, and it was the early days when they were like big boxes.
Almost like
And-
Polaroid.
yeah, exactly. But I had my still camera with me, so I said to one of the other people in the program, I said, "Come and go with me, because there's a rumor that Nelson Mandela is going to be there." I said, "You take the still camera, I'm going to take the video camera. If he comes in the door, start shooting."
Wow.
And that's what we did. So he did come, he showed up, and somebody came in and they said, "Nelson Mandela's coming." And I said, "Okay, Carol, get your camera." And I started videotaping, and she started taking pictures with the still camera, and that captured that picture. In fact, there's several pictures of me walking through the newsroom with him, because she was following my instructions. She was taking pictures the whole time he was
trained her
there.
well.
Yeah, it was really, and it was so exciting, because that was, as I said, after I had covered him when he had come to the U.S. in 1990. And, you know, when he comes into a room, he had such a presence, and so serene. And then you think a man who had been mistreated the way he was, who had spent all those years in prison, he came out with no bitterness.
Yes.
He came out just such a wonderful example of how you can survive adversity and go on to do great things, which he did, to become the first black president of his country. Yeah.
Wow. I can't, I'm over it. I'm over the moon today. I am over the moon today.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to do this, and I really appreciate your highlighting my career and the work that I've done over the years. I've enjoyed it. It has been a pleasure to have done so many stories, to have met so many people, and then to find so many people that I've helped. You know, people come up, like the woman I was talking about who got the heart, and I didn't find out till 30 years later how much she wanted to thank me for saving her life by putting that story on the air. It's a powerful medium, you know, and I really get very, very distressed when I hear the President of the United States calling journalists the enemy of the people. We are not by any means enemies. We are here to help, to give information that is helpful, and that is one of the things I'm happy that I was able to do. And I hope that people will realize that when we are called ugly names, don't give up on us, because without us, there are a lot of things you wouldn't know.
Absolutely.
if it were not for the journalists, yeah.
And you've done us a major honor.
Well, thank you.
And it's the legacy, what you built, the tapestry of your work, and that's how I see it, is tapestry.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to describe it.
I'm just blown away by it, and I can just appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all you do and all you've done.
Well, I pay great tribute to those two people who raised me. My mom and my dad, Jackson and Anna Rodgers, did a good job.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you wanted to ask about?
Well,
Covered a lot.
We covered a lot.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know a little bit more about, truly, what do you do in your spare time?
Spare? What's that?
Exactly.
Spare time?
Because the only reason I ask that is because I believe that when too much who is given, much is required.
Yes, and that's why I've done so much, because I feel that I have been blessed. As I said, I didn't start out with much to give, but you know, it's really interesting, because sometimes people say, well, you know, I can't give, I don't have any money.
Right.
You know, as I've said several times, I did not grow up in a household with extra money, not by any means. But we gave of our time. We gave of our service through the church. You know, even when I was little, I mean, you know, like a little kid, like 9, 10 years old, you know, I would go and take, my mom would sometimes make biscuits or rolls, and I would take them and give them to the older people in the neighborhood.
Like, that's what we say.
Yeah, you know, and just all kinds of things that we learned to do that didn't require a lot of money. And there are so many things that you can do that don't require a lot of money. You don't have to have money to go out and pick up the trash off the streets.
No, not at all.
You know, you see the streets, you complain about, oh my God, they're not picking up the trash. Pick it up.
Yes.
You know, get on some rubber gloves and get a stick and go out there and pick it up. But I mean, there's so many things that need doing in any community. And you don't have to, you know, go very far. It's probably right in your own neighborhood. There may be a kid who just needs somebody to just talk to, because there are kids like that who aren't getting what I got at home, you know, a supportive set of parents and other people in the household. So you could go and volunteer in the school. You could go to the library and read to children. I mean, there's so many things you can do that you can give. And then when you get to that point where you've got extra money, then definitely write those checks, because that's how those organizations keep going.
True. That's true.
And you know, from the United Negro College Fund, which I owe a debt to forever, I still give them money, you know, because whenever I've got something, I give, because those organizations have to run on something.
Yes.
And but giving can come from any level, and you don't have to be important or famous or whatever. Giving is appreciated when when people are in need.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that. Sometimes when folks give, how do I say it? It doesn't leave a footprint. because the genuine portion of it is not there.
Yes.
I believe, this is how I feel about this, is when you put your soul into
Yes.
something, when you put your you into it, those steps.
There is a little poem. It's a very short one.
Yes.
It says, "What we give is what we share, but the gift without the giver is bare."
Oh,
You see that?
well said.
Exactly what you were just saying.
Apropos.
The giver has to be a part of the gift.
Yes.
So it's not just what you give, not just what you share, but putting your heart and soul into it.
Absolutely.
And
It's like a fragrance.
yeah, it is.
To me.
Yeah.
And that's what exudes from you.
Yes.
It's like an aroma.
Yeah, it is.
And you know, a certain moments and periods in your life, at least for me, those memories are solidified and colored richly
Yeah.
when you can, sometimes you just smell.
Yeah.
That fragrance comes
Yeah.
back, and then you can close your eyes and go back to that point in time.
Yes.
And I think that's what you've done.
Well, yes,
you
and I
flowered the
go.
world.
Well, thank you so much. But I go back so many times to, again, my parents
Yes.
and what they taught me, and you know, I still talk to them whenever they're both buried in Tennessee, and
Yes.
when I go back home to my hometown, Knoxville, Tennessee, I always go to visit their grave, and I spend some time talking to them.
Okay.
I talk to them anyway when I'm not there, but especially when I'm there, because I feel their presence much more strongly when I'm standing in front of their headstone. You know?
Yes.
But yeah, I just feel that when, as you say, when we are blessed, we do need to share. But our sharing can be in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
And I think people get trapped into thinking, well, I'm not rich and I'm not this. I can't do anything. But you can. There's always something you can do.
Yes.
There's always something you can do.
Yes, and to be able to inspire. That's the other thing. Even for me, you inspire me.
Well, thank
You
you.
know, and
Thank
it gives me hope to be able to leave. I'm the third of 5 living generations right now.
Wow,
From
that's
my grandmother
wonderful.
to my granddaughter.
Wow, 5 living generations.
5 living generations right now.
That is amazing.
I can only imagine what my granddaughter will say when I go home and say, "Guess who I got to meet?"
Your granddaughter's probably too young to know who
Well,
I am.
I'm going to show the pictures and the images because
Yeah.
she's already of the mindset of, I can do
And that's-
anything.
And that is wonderful to have that mindset at a young age and to have it encouraged.
Yes.
And say, yes, you can.
Yes.
And let's make a plan. You know, there were so many things that I did in my younger life that I, you know, didn't really realize what the significance of
Yes.
them was. But we had in 9th grade, when I was 13 years old, we had to make a scrapbook of what we wanted to be in, you know, a career scrapbook.
Yes.
And since I was at that point thinking I was going to be a secretary, you know, I was looking in magazines to find pictures of typewriters and
Right.
secretaries and, you know, all that.
Office
There were none of whom were
None,
black.
I'm
None of
sure.
whom were black. But my mother saved everything. And many years later, I found in a box that career book I had made.
Oh.
But on the first page, I had found in a magazine a little poem and pasted it on the front page. And it said, what man has done, man can do, but these days so can women too.
Ooh.
Now, I was 13.
Ooh.
That's a very feminist
is,
point of
yes,
view.
most certainly.
And feminism didn't even come along until I was like in my 20s, you
Before
know.
the
But
time.
I mean, the fact that that spoke to me at 13.
Yes.
So much so that I pasted it on the front page of my career book. Where did that come
Who
from?
knew?
Yeah.
But see, that being said, just like we were just talking about my granddaughter, it when you can start to see the images and you can start to mirror,
Right.
as if you're looking in the mirror.
Exactly. And that's why I'm so happy for young people now. Whenever I meet a young person who's really doing things, I just am so excited for them because they are taking all those opportunities that got created from my generation and the generation before mine. I mean, Belva Davis, who
Yes.
many people know, was the first African-American female on TV on a regular basis west of the Mississippi, not just in San Francisco, but
Period.
west of the Mississippi. And that was 1963, so we're not talking that long ago. The first. And we're still getting so many areas in which you see an article, this is the first black woman, the first
Yes.
black man, the first. It's still, in 2020, there's still a lot of firsts out there. And so whenever people think there's no opportunity for me, there's always an opportunity. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't been done. And there's a lot of things that need to be done. So your granddaughter who is just talking, you know, energetic and thinking, I'm going to do something, encourage it. Absolutely. I told you this story earlier about Jessie Norman, the opera singer.
Yes, we should
I said, yeah. She said she unfortunately passed away this past year, but she said at one point, someone had asked her, how early in your life did you know that you had that kind of voice that you could become an opera singer? Mm-hmm. And she said, well, whenever I sang in the living room, my parents applauded. So that is what does it. You know, her parents applauded. That's what happened to me. Whenever I did something, my parents applauded. I didn't know that one day there would be a whole community of people or thousands and thousands of people watching me on TV. But my parents applauded. So that says you're on the right track. Keep going.
Keep going.
And that's what we have to do for our children, our nieces, our nephews, the children in our neighborhoods. You know, encourage them.
Yes.
Let them know that there is something other than a life of crime.
Absolutely.
There is something other than just, you know, hanging out. That there's, and because there's so many smart kids who wind up in prison. True. Smart young men who wind up in prison who could have used that skill and that brain power if somebody had channeled it, you know.
That's it. A famous scripture comes to me, and my people perish for lack of knowledge, and without a vision they perish.
Why does anybody think that during slavery it was against the law to teach slaves to read? Because they knew. They knew that knowledge is power. Absolutely. That knowledge transports you to another place. To make it against the law, just think about that. To make it against the law that a whole group of people could not read. And then they wonder why we are in the circumstances we are as a people, because so much has been done over the years to hold us back. You know, when you say you can't teach this child to read, when you say you can't own a piece of property, when you say you can't come in this restaurant, when you say you can't go to this school, you are holding that person's potential back. But look at it. We did it anyway.
Exactly.
we did it anyway.
Yes, we did.
With all those obstacles. With all those obstacles.
But see, that's a nugget in itself.
Exactly.
That you say that, because when there is an obstacle,
yeah,
if you have no hope, no vision,
yeah,
or no sense of survival,
yes,
you stay behind the obstacle. But what they didn't realize they were doing is they were forcing us to make our own roads.
Yeah. That's right.
Our own path.
And we often made new roads that they never thought about. Unfortunately, back in the day, they used to steal it from us, and they get the patent. But all of that, a lot of that is coming out now. That the people who should have gotten credit are getting credit. But you know, it doesn't matter. Yes, there will always be people who will not encourage you. There will always be people who don't want you. There will always be people who are against you.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean you can't do it.
True.
You keep moving.
Yeah.
You just keep moving.
Well, and even when you do hear that noise, if you start to understand it, it will just direct you.
And learn your history. I say to young black people all the time, you know, learn your history.
That's important.
Because it's important for you to know the shoulders that you're standing on,
yes,
to know how much has already been done so that you can be sitting in wherever you're sitting.
Yes.
You can be riding in that Porsche or that BMW,
yes,
and you can be living in that very nice house. There was a lot of people who did a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice for you to be where you are. So don't ever not pay attention to what has happened before. We really do need to know our history. And I'm happy to see that has happened more in my lifetime, because when I was in elementary school, you know, we did not learn hardly anything about black history.
Neither did I.
Yeah, by the time I got to high school, they were celebrating, it was just a week though, it wasn't the whole month. It was Negro History Week.
Really?
Yeah, in February.
Really?
It wasn't, they had not made, it didn't become a month until, I think maybe the 70s. It might have become a month. I'd have to look that up, the date when it actually became a month. But it was Negro History Week when I was in high school.
Interesting. Interesting.
And it was Negro History Week.
I heard you say that. It makes you want to pause for
In
a
fact,
moment.
I got all
It
the
takes
labels. when I was in elementary school, I went to a colored school because in Tennessee, everything was segregated. So there was a separate school system for colored kids.
Yes.
So I went to a colored school, a
Yes.
2-room school,
Yes.
8 grades, 4 grades in one room, 4 grades in the other room, 2 teachers. For all of that. Now, see, that's what I'm
look at
saying.
today.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You know, don't think of, you know, you got obstacles. Just think of what people have done with so little, you know. So I went to a colored school.
Yes.
And then by the time I got to, that was to 8th grade. And then by the time I got to junior high school and high school, we were Negroes.
Yes.
And then by the time I graduated from college in 1968, we were black and proud.
Say it out loud,
Yeah, say it out loud. I'm black and I'm proud. But isn't that interesting? I mean, that evolution.
Yes.
My generation was right there on the cutting edge of all of that. You know, because us post-war babies, baby boomers.
But it was the making, though.
Yeah.
It was the making.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you don't know what you have until it's broken, right?
That's
or
true.
Or it has to stand alone.
Yeah.
Then you realize the value
Yeah.
of what it is. You know,
Well,
and you're just a jewel.
we can each pat ourselves and each other on the back because we're still here,
Yes.
as Maya Angelou said, and still we rise.
And still we rise.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, Barbara, you talked about so many of the things that you actually accomplished.
Yes.
But there are some things that you didn't get a chance to touch on.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. When I went to my high school class reunion last year and I was talking about the fact that I had finally finished my 7th continent and gone to Antarctica, and somebody said, well, have you been to all of the states?
Oh.
And I just, I had to stop and think about it. So I had to go and get the map out. And as it turns out, there are about 11 that I haven't been to.
Really?
Yeah. So I got to do that. I've got to fill in those 11 that I haven't been to.
Okay.
I didn't realize I'd never been to Arkansas. I'd never been to Delaware.
Oh.
And I only count it as having been there as if you were actually there, not if you drove through.
Oh, not if you.
Yeah, no,
You mean
that
no
doesn't count.
layovers?
No,
Layovers don't
no,
count.
layovers don't count. You have to have actually gone to that state and done something, eat dinner, have a cup of coffee, visit some friends. Got to be in that state and do something. That's the only way. Because if I did just the flyovers and pass-bys, I probably would have them all. Although North and South Dakota, I have not been to, and I don't think I've even flown over North and South Dakota. But those are in my 11. So I'm going to do that. I want to make sure that I have touched down and done something, and had a McDonald's hamburger or something in the states that are left. So I have 11 left to cover. And actually, no, I only have 10 now because I did one in July after that reunion.
Okay.
Alaska. I went on an Alaska cruise last July.
I've never been. And
See,
I understand it's
I hadn't
beautiful.
either. It is beautiful, but because I had done Antarctica the year before,
Yes.
it kind of pales in comparison because Antarctica is so much ice and snow, and the glaciers and everything in Alaska are melting. It's really very sad to see they're literally melting because of global warming. Yeah.
And so you
can see it.
Oh,
You can see it. You can see it. And when you go to the presentation, there's a glacier called the Mendenhall Glacier, which is
Yes.
one of the largest ones. And they have a visitor center there, and they show sort of like the history. When you see the pictures from 100 years ago
Yes.
of how big it was and what size it is now, you can see how much it has shrunk. And so it is definitely changing.
That's alarming.
It is alarming. It is alarming. Climate change is real, despite what some people want you to believe that it isn't. You can see it. It's happening. It's even happening in Antarctica. I mean, it's not as noticeable there because there is so much ice and snow.
But
there's ice there, this blew me away when I was there. There's blue ice, and that ice is like more than 1 million years old.
Really?
The same ice that's been there year after year, getting stacked on, stacked on, stacked on. And that's what makes it blue, because there's so many layers stacked together that it changes the way light refracts through it.
Oh, wow.
And it gives it a blue
wow.
cast. Yeah, so
That's
it's literally
majestic.
blue ice. Yeah.
Wow.
Millions
that's
of years
majestic.
old. Yeah.
And would you passing through on a ship?
Yes, we were on a ship, and we were so fortunate because the crew told us that the group that had gone, it's a 2-week trip,
Yes.
that the group had gone the 2 weeks before us, that it was horrible weather. They got to see almost nothing. It was foggy and rainy.
Okay.
And when we sailed into the channel, coming
Yes.
into Antarctica, it warmed up to 28 degrees. which was really wonderful because I had looked up the temperature before I left home, and 2 weeks before it had been -8.
Oh, okay. All right.
And a rainbow came across the sky.
Oh, gorgeous.
Beautiful.
Oh.
Just beautiful.
It was
And
just for you.
and the crew was saying, you guys are so lucky that you're able to see so much, because they said that's the downside of doing a trip like that, which is why it's hard to do, because you don't know, you might pay your money and get nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
And but I said, thank you, Jesus. But it was so interesting on the ship. So many people had that on their bucket list,
Really?
There were people in wheelchairs and on walkers who were saying, this is something I've wanted to do all my life. And I'll tell you one very sort of sad story. We were we were on one of the buses that takes you to a certain point. And a woman sitting next to me, I think she was from Wyoming, I think.
Okay.
And we started talking. And I said, are you enjoying your trip? And she said, yes, I am. She said, but this was a trip my husband and I had planned that we were going to do on our 25th wedding anniversary. And she said, this is our 25th wedding anniversary, but unfortunately he died. And he didn't make it. And she said, but I brought his ashes. And she said, do you think I'm crazy for doing that? I said, no, I don't think you're crazy. She said, some of my friends said that was not a good thing to do. She said, but I felt like we had planned it all those years. We were going to do it, and he didn't make it. I wanted to bring his ashes. And I thought that was so beautiful.
That's wonderful.
And she thanked me when we got off the bus. She said, thank you so much. She said, because my friends were saying I shouldn't have done this. She said, you made me feel so much better about having brought his ashes. I said, I think it's wonderful that you brought some of his ashes with you, because he was your husband for all those years, and you'd planned that together. Yeah, so she had to come by herself. So there's just, it's just so many people out there who are, when I travel, I meet so many interesting people and just have so many interesting stories. It's just wonderful. I just feel so blessed that I get a chance to live out my dream.
And then they are blessed because they got to meet you.
Oh, thank you for
and
saying
again,
that.
You have the footprints that make a difference, and I love that about you. Thank you so much for joining us and being part of education in our community, and sitting in on our conversation with, I say, the illustrious Barbara Rodgers.
Thank you, Zena.
So
thank
much for your
you.
time.
Yes, thank you. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Oh my goodness.